All right, picture this. It's the summer of 1976 in New York City. It's hot, sticky, the kind of summer where the air feels heavy, and everyone's trying to escape into the night air. Disco is blasting from bars. People are crowding into nightclubs, and even though the city's kind of falling apart financially, there's still this electricity in the air. People are broke, crime is high, but the nightlife? Unstoppable. But here's the thing. Beneath that energy, New York was dangerous. Like, really dangerous. We're talking one of the highest crime rates in the city's history. Murders, muggings, robberies. It wasn't just happening in the bad parts of town. It was everywhere. The cops were overwhelmed. The city was broke, and people were scared, but also kind of numb, because crime was just normal. And then, out of nowhere, someone shows up who takes that normal level of fear and cranks it up into absolute chaos. A faceless figure who, at first, seems like just another random act of violence. But by the time the city realizes what's happening, it's too late. People are dying, and the killer? He's taunting the entire city. He calls himself the Son of Sam. Now, we all know New York has had its fair share of infamous criminals. But the thing about Son of Sam was that he didn't kill for money. He didn't kill for revenge. He didn't even kill people he knew. He killed strangers, mostly young women, and he killed for the thrill of it, which, by the way, is literally every single person's nightmare. Because how do you protect yourself from someone who doesn't even have a pattern? Let's rewind, though, because we need to set the scene before this guy really begins. The first known shooting happened on July 29th, 1976. Two young women, Donna Lauria and Jody Valenti, were sitting in a car outside Donna's home in the Bronx. It was just a typical night. They'd been hanging out. Donna had said goodnight to her family, and they were just chatting in the car. Out of the darkness, a man walks up to them, pulls out a gun, and fires. Donna is killed instantly. She's only 18. Jody is badly injured but survives. And the man? He just walks away. No robbery. No words. Just cold-blooded murder. At first, the police think, okay, maybe this is just a random act of violence. Because again, New York was full of that in the 70s. People got shot all the time. But this wasn't random. Not at all. Fast forward a couple months to October 23rd, 1976. Queens. A young couple, Carl Denaro and Rosemary Keenan, are sitting in their car after a night out. They're just talking, nothing unusual. And then, boom, out of nowhere, shots ring out. The windows shatter. Carl is hit in the head. Miraculously, he survives. Rosemary speeds away in panic, saving both their lives. The cops are scratching their heads at this point. 2 car shootings a couple of months apart. Young people, late at night, the shooter disappears both times. But again, this is New York. Could just be coincidence, right? Wrong. Because in November, it happens again. Donna DeMazy and Joanne Lomino, 2 teenage girls, are walking home from a movie in Queens. A man approaches them, pulls out a gun, and fires. Joanne is paralyzed for life. Donna is injured but survives. Once again, no robbery, no words exchanged, nothing. Just pure violence. By now, you'd think the police would start connecting the dots, right? But nope. The cases are scattered across boroughs. The descriptions are vague, and the cops don't even realize they're dealing with the same person. Which, to be fair, isn't shocking. The NYPD at the time was completely overrun. They were dealing with thousands of violent crimes every year, and unless something obvious connected the dots, they weren't putting it together. But New Yorkers? They were starting to whisper, because by Christmas 1976, another couple, Christine Freund and John Deal, were attacked while sitting in their car. Christine didn't make it. John survived. And this time, the city started to notice, because the newspapers were like, wait a minute, young couples, sitting in cars, getting shot at night? That's not random anymore. And that's when the media got involved. And when the media gets involved in a case like this, it's game over. Because suddenly it's not just crime, it's a story. Headlines start popping up about a possible serial shooter. Rumors spread. People start panicking. And the killer? He's loving every second of it. Now, Let me pause here for a second because I just want you to imagine what it felt like at that time. You're a young woman in New York in the 70s. You're finally enjoying some freedom, going out with your friends, staying out late, maybe dating. And suddenly, every single headline is screaming that there's a man out there specifically targeting women like you. Random women doing normal things, sitting in cars, walking home, living their lives. And he could strike anywhere, anytime. That kind of fear is suffocating. People literally stop going out. Women cut and dyed their hair to avoid fitting the type the killer seemed to go for. Nightclubs saw fewer couples showing up. Parents begged their kids to stay inside. And New York, a city that thrives on nightlife, started to shut down. And here's the creepiest part. This wasn't even the peak. At this point, the police didn't even know what they were really dealing with. And the killer hadn't even revealed his name yet. That part? Oh, it was coming. And when it did, the city would never be the same again. So, back to the timeline. It's January 1977, and the murders continue. On January 30th, Christine Freud and her fiancé are attacked again in Queens. Same style. Young couple, sitting in a car, suddenly ambushed. Christine dies. John survives. The police are finally starting to connect the dots here. But it's still not enough, because a killer is about to raise the stakes. On March 8, 1977, Virginia Voskerikian, a 19-year-old college student, is walking home from class. She's in Queens, carrying her books. She sees a man approach. She holds up her textbooks in front of her face, almost like a shield. But it doesn't matter. He pulls the trigger, and she's killed instantly. At this point, people are terrified. The police are overwhelmed. The press is hysterical. And then, as if this guy hadn't already caused enough chaos, he decides to write a letter. And this is the moment when the son of Sam becomes the son of Sam. Because in April 1977, a handwritten letter is left near the scene of another attack. It's addressed to the police and the press. In it, the killer calls himself Son of Sam. He describes himself as a monster driven by dark forces, and he taunts the cops, daring them to catch him. The letter is rambling, creepy, and filled with strange references. He claims he's controlled by a demon, that he has no choice but to kill, and that he will never stop. And then he signs it, Son of Sam. The media eats it up. Headlines scream the new name. People are even more terrified now, because this isn't just a random shooter anymore. This is a self-proclaimed monster. Someone who is literally feeding off their fear. And the craziest part? The killer is reading those headlines too. He's cutting out articles, saving them, and enjoying the panic. He wants the spotlight, and he's getting exactly what he wants. So here we are, middle of 1977. New York is in full-blown hysteria. The son of Sam has killed multiple people, wounded others, and sent threatening letters. Women are changing their appearance. Couples are avoiding parking in cars at night. People are living in constant fear. And the police? They're completely out of their depth. They have no idea who this guy is. No clear suspects. No solid evidence. Just chaos. And the scariest part? He's not even close to being done. Okay, so now that the son of Sam has the entire city of New York in a chokehold of fear, let's back up and talk about the man behind the gun, David Berkowitz. Because the thing about these cases is, yes, the crimes themselves are terrifying, but when you start peeling back the layers of the killer's life, you usually find this mix of tragedy, trauma, and straight up, what the hell is wrong with this person? And Berkowitz? Oh, his story checks all those boxes. David Richard Berkowitz was born on June 1st, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York. But here's the first twist. He wasn't actually born Berkowitz. He was born Richard David Falco. His mother, Betty, was having an affair at the time, and when she got pregnant, the man she was involved with basically said, "Nope, not my problem, not my kid." And he bailed. Betty's husband didn't want a baby either. So little Richard David was put up for adoption pretty much right after birth. Enter Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz. They were a working-class Jewish couple from the Bronx. They couldn't have kids of their own, so they adopted him. They gave him the name David Berkowitz, raised him in their modest apartment. and from the outside, it looked like he had a stable enough home. He wasn't abused. He wasn't neglected. He had two parents who loved him, who worked hard, and who provided for him. But inside David, something was already off. From the time he was little, people described him as difficult. He had these intense mood swings, outbursts of anger, and he just couldn't seem to connect with other kids. Teachers said he was bright, but restless. He didn't pay attention. He daydreamed. And when he did talk, it was usually about dark stuff, death, violence, destruction. Like, imagine your 8-year-old constantly bringing up death at the dinner table. By the time he was a teenager, those warning signs were getting bigger and louder. David had this growing obsession with fire. Not like the normal, oh, kids like fireworks kind of thing. No, David would set random fires all around his neighborhood. Trash cans, abandoned lots, vacant buildings, you name it. He lit it up. He later admitted to setting literally hundreds of fires. Hundreds? That's not a phase, that's a compulsion. And he kept detailed notes about every fire he set, like he was curating his own little destruction diary. But here's the thing. No one really stopped him. Neighbors thought he was odd. Teachers thought he was troubled. His parents worried, but they didn't know how to handle it. This was the 60s. There wasn't really a framework for maybe this kid is showing early signs of psychopathy. So instead of treatment or intervention, he just kept spiraling. Then, when David was 14, his adoptive mother, Pearl, died of breast cancer. And this broke him. She had been his anchor, the person who gave him structure, and suddenly she was gone. He was left with his adoptive father, Nathan, who did love him but wasn't as emotionally present. David sank deeper into depression, isolation, and anger. He started skipping school, getting into fights, and spending even more time alone, lighting fires. And on top of all of that, David carried this gnawing feeling of abandonment. He knew he was adopted, but he didn't know the full story yet. He just knew his birth mother hadn't kept him, and that rejection festered inside him like an infection. Later, when he did track down his biological family, he found out he had half-siblings who were raised by his birth mother, meaning she could have kept him but chose not to. And for David, that was like salt in a wound. Now, let's sprinkle in another layer. David believed he heard voices, not in the metaphorical, I feel guided sense. Actual, audible voices. He claimed they told him he was worthless, that he was doomed, that he had to destroy. And as he got older, those voices started commanding him to act. He'd later blame a neighbor's dog, saying the dog was possessed by a demon that told him to kill, which, I know, sounds completely absurd, but when someone is that far gone mentally, in their mind it feels real. After high school, David did what a lot of restless young men did in the early 70s. He joined the military. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1971 and was stationed at Fort Knox before being sent to South Korea. And you know what's wild? By most accounts, he actually did okay there. He wasn't a star soldier or anything, but he wasn't a disaster either. He qualified as a marksman, which, knowing what he did later, is chilling. He learned how to use weapons, how to follow orders, how to blend into a group. It gave him structure. But when his service ended and he came back to New York in 1974, the structure was gone. He was in his early 20s, living in a small apartment in Yonkers, working odd jobs like mail sorter for the post office. And he was lonely, like painfully lonely. He tried dating, but women found him awkward and intense. He didn't really have close friends. And the voices, they came back louder than ever. This is when David's delusion started to solidify into mythology he'd later tell the world. He became obsessed with the idea that demons were controlling him. He latched onto the story that his neighbor's black Labrador retriever was possessed by Satan and was commanding him to kill. He claimed that the Sam in Son of Sam referred to this demonic figure, Sam, the master, who gave him orders through the dog. Now, whether he actually believed that or whether it was an excuse he cooked up later is still debated. But here's what's important. David was building himself a narrative. He wasn't just some guy with violent urges. He was a soldier in a supernatural war, chosen by demons, given a mission. And that story gave him purpose. Twisted, evil purpose, but purpose nonetheless. And you know what else? He was starting to test himself. Remember all those fires he set as a kid? That was his practice. He admitted later that the fires were his way of playing God, deciding what lived, what burned, what got destroyed. Killing animals was also part of it. He tortured and killed pets in his neighborhood, feeding that dark impulse and seeing how far he could push himself. By the time 1976 rolled around, David Berkowitz was a ticking time bomb. He had the skills from the Army. He had the delusions in his head. He had the loneliness and rejection eating away at him. And now, he had a gun, a .44 caliber revolver he'd bought illegally. When he walked up to that first car in July of 1976 and pulled the trigger, it wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. It was years of rage, rejection, and delusion exploding all at once. And once he started, he couldn't stop. The voices told him to keep going. The headlines told him he was powerful, and the fear in the city told him he was famous. What's interesting is that even though he later tried to paint himself as this demon-possessed puppet, his behavior behind the scenes showed a different picture. He kept track of the media coverage. He saved newspaper clippings. He relished the fact that New Yorkers were terrified of him. That's not just mental illness. That's ego. That's someone who wanted attention, who wanted to be larger than life. And that's exactly what he got. But here's the chilling part. While he was out there creating panic, go to work like normal, blending in with society, no one around him suspected a thing. His neighbors thought he was odd, sure, but not dangerous. His co-workers thought he was quiet, maybe a little weird, but harmless. He was a guy next door, the one who waved hello, the one who blended into the background. And that's why he got away with it for so long. David Berkowitz was the perfect storm. A troubled childhood, a fractured mind, a craving for attention, and just enough normalcy to hide in plain sight. And in 1977, as his crimes escalated, that perfect storm was about to hit New York City like a hurricane, because killing strangers wasn't enough anymore. He wanted the whole city to know his name. He wanted them to fear him. And with one creepy, taunting letter, he gave himself the name that would haunt New York forever, Son of Sam. So, last time we left off, New York was in chaos. Random couples in cars were getting shot. A college girl was gunned down on the street. And suddenly a letter shows up where the killer names himself Son of Sam. The whole city is terrified. The press is eating it up, and the police are scrambling. But before we get deeper into the killings, we've got to back up. Who is this man behind the gun? Who is David Berkowitz, the person who will become Son of Sam? Because let me tell you, this story doesn't start with a demon dog. That whole, the neighbor's dog told me to kill thing? Yeah, that came later. But the actual foundation of David's life, the trauma, the rejection, the loneliness, that all started way earlier. David Berkowitz was born in Brooklyn in June of 1953. And right out of the gate, things were complicated. His birth name wasn't even Berkowitz. It was Richard David Falco. His mother, Betty, was married to one man but having an affair with another. When she got pregnant, both of those men basically wanted nothing to do with the baby. One denied being the father. The other said, "Don't bring that child home." So, baby Richard David was put up for adoption almost immediately. He was adopted by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, a working-class couple in the Bronx. They couldn't have children of their own, so they took him in and renamed him David. Now, Nathan and Pearl weren't abusive. They weren't monsters. They were quiet, ordinary people who loved their son, maybe a little overprotective, maybe a little smothering, but genuinely caring. Still, David grew up with this invisible hole inside him. He was wanted enough to be adopted, but unwanted enough that his biological parents rejected him, and that knowledge stuck to him like glue. From the time he was a little kid, people noticed he was off. Teachers said he was smart, but restless. He couldn't focus. He couldn't sit still, and he had this dark edge about him. He'd say creepy things. He'd lash out in anger, and he just seemed perpetually unhappy. His adoptive parents worried, but they didn't know what to do. This was the 50s and 60s. Mental health wasn't exactly dinner table conversation. Then came the fire obsession. And not like, oh, kids like matches kind of obsession. No, David loved fire. He loved destruction. He set trash cans on fire. He set vacant lots on fire. He set random little blazes around the neighborhood and then watched them burn, fascinated. Later, he would admit he had set literally hundreds of fires and kept detailed records of them, like a fire diary. He loved control of it, the godlike power of deciding what would burn and what wouldn't. When David was 14, tragedy hit. His adoptive mother, Pearl, died of breast cancer, and that sent him over the edge. He had been difficult before, but after losing her, he became almost unmanageable. He fought with his father constantly. He skipped school. He wandered the streets alone. He lashed out. He was consumed with anger, and he didn't know where to put it. He did eventually graduate high school, though not with great grades. Then in 1971, at just 18, he joined the U.S. Army. He thought maybe the military would give him structure, maybe a sense of belonging, and weirdly, for a while, it kind of worked. He was stationed at Fort Knox and later in South Korea. By all accounts, he wasn't a terrible soldier. He was decent at following orders. He was trained as a marksman, and he got by. But the loneliness followed him there too. He didn't bond deeply with anyone. He didn't suddenly become confident and social. He was still David, the odd, angry loner. He left the Army in 1974 after 3 years and returned to New York with no plan, no purpose, and no support system. That's when things really began to unravel. He bounced around in low-level jobs, security guard, mail sorter at the post office. He rented a tiny apartment in Yonkers. He kept to himself. And all that isolation gave his mind room to spiral. He started hearing voices. Not like, my conscience is talking to me. Actual voices. He said they mocked him, commanded him, told him to destroy. And he believed them. Or at least, he wanted to believe them. Because the alternative was admitting he just wanted to kill for no reason, and that would make him the monster. If he framed it as demons controlling him, then maybe he wasn't fully to blame. This is when the whole demon dog story was born. David had a neighbor named Sam Carr, who owned a black Labrador retriever. David later claimed this dog was possessed by a demon, and the demon was telling him to kill. He said Sam, the demon master, communicated to the dog, and that's why he called himself the Son of Sam. Now, whether he actually believed this or whether it was just an excuse is up for debate. Some experts think he truly was schizophrenic. Others think he made up the demon dog thing to avoid the death penalty. What's clear is that David loved the drama of it. He loved having a story. And the demon narrative made him more mysterious, more infamous. But the truth is, his need for attention had been there all along. Even as a kid, he'd act out just to get noticed. As a soldier, he bragged about things he hadn't done. As an adult, he collected clippings of his own crimes. He wanted to be feared. He wanted to be talked about. And the demon story was just one more way to make people shiver. The sad reality is that David wasn't a supernatural puppet. He was a lonely, angry man with a fractured mind and a desperate craving for recognition. The fire setting, the voices, the delusions, all of it built up until finally he exploded. By the time he bought that .44 caliber revolver in 1976, his fate was sealed. That gun became his outlet, his megaphone, his way of finally making the world pay attention to the boy who always felt abandoned and invisible. When he shot Donna Loria in the Bronx that summer night, it wasn't random. It was the first act of a man who had been rehearsing destruction his entire life. And once he got a taste of it, the power, the headlines, the fear, he couldn't stop. And the scariest part? To everyone around him, he was just David, the quiet guy next door, the co-worker who kept to himself, the tenant who waved hello but never said much. No one suspected that behind that ordinary face was a man who was about to paralyze an entire city with fear. David Berkowitz had finally found his purpose, and New York was about to pay the price. So now we're at the part where David Berkowitz, the Son of Sam, actually begins his reign of terror. And I'm going to walk you through the murders one by one, because this wasn't just some guy going out once, killing, and then hiding forever. No, this was a series, and each attack escalated the fear, the paranoia, and the mythology around him. It all begins on July 29th, 1976, in the Bronx. It's a hot summer night, and two girls, Donna Loria, 18, and her friend Jody Valeni, 19, are sitting in Jody's car outside Donna's apartment. They're just hanging out, talking after a night out, doing the totally normal teenage thing of not wanting the night to end. Donna tells her mom she'll be inside in a minute. And then, out of nowhere, a man walks up to the car. He pulls out a revolver and fires. Donna is killed instantly, shot in the chest. Jody is wounded but manages to survive. At first, police think maybe it's a random street crime. New York in the 70s was no stranger to violence. But then, months later, it happens again. October 23rd, 1976, in Queens. Carl DeNaro, 20, and Rosemary Keenan, 18, are parked in a car after night out. Suddenly, the windows shatter as bullets rip through the car. Carl is hit in the head, but somehow survives. Rosemary escapes with minor injuries. No robbery, no confrontation, no reason, just violence out of nowhere. Now, here's where you start to see a pattern forming. Young people, couples, sitting in cars at night. The randomness makes it scarier. It's not targeted. It's not personal. It could be anyone. November 27th, 1976. In Queens again. Donna DeMazy, 16, and Joe and Lomino, 18, are walking home after seeing a movie. A man approaches them, pulls out a gun, and shoots. Donna is injured. Joanne is hit in the spine and left paralyzed. And the shooter? He walks away, just vanishes into the night. By this point, the NYPD is starting to think, okay, this isn't random anymore. Somebody is hunting. But they don't have a name. They don't even have a consistent description, because the attacks are so quick and chaotic that survivors only catch glimpses. A stocky guy, maybe with dark hair, maybe with glasses. Not a lot to go on. And then, January 30th, 1977, things get even worse. Christine Freund, 26, and her fiancé John Deal, 30, are sitting in a car in Queens after night at the movies. Shots ring out. Christine is hit twice and dies. John escapes physically unharmed but completely traumatized. Now, the media is starting to pick up on it. They're calling it the .44 caliber killer because ballistic tests confirm the same gun, a Charter Arms .44 Bulldog revolver, was used in all the shootings. And people in New York are freaking out. Young couples are avoiding parked cars. People don't want to be outside at night. The sense of random danger is spreading. March 8th, 1977, Columbia student Virginia Voskarickian, 19, is walking home from class in Queens. She's alone, carrying her books. A man walks up to her, pulls out the .44, and shoots her in the face. She dies instantly. The brutality of it shocks the city. It's not just couples anymore. Anyone can be a target. And then, just a month later, April 17th, 1977, Alexander Esau, 20, and Valentina Suriani, 18, are sitting in a car in the Bronx. Both are shot and killed. And this time, the killer leaves something behind. A letter. This is the infamous Son of Sam letter, handwritten, taunting the police and the press. In it, he calls himself Son of Sam, says he's a servant to a demon, and promises to keep killing until he's caught. The letter is rambling, filled with bizarre phrases and twisted humor. But one thing is clear. This guy wants attention. He wants fame. And he just gave himself a brand. The newspapers run with it. The .44 caliber killer becomes Son of Sam. Headlines scream his name. Everyone in New York knows about him now. And the fear? It skyrockets. Police flood the city with extra patrols. Young women change their hairstyles, because rumor has it that Son of Sam targets women with long, dark hair. Hair salons are suddenly packed with women getting blonde cuts. Couples stop going out at night. The city feels under siege. June 26, 1977, Sal Lupo, 20, and Judy Placido, 17, are sitting in a car in Queens after leaving a disco. They're shot at. Both survive with injuries. And then the final attack, July 31st, 1977, in Brooklyn. Stacy Moskowitz, 20, and Robert Violani, 20, are sitting in Robert's car after a night out. Shots ring out. Stacy is killed. Robert is blinded. It's the only attack in Brooklyn, and it's the one that finally leads to Berkowitz's downfall. Because this time there's a witness. A woman walking her dog nearby sees a man lurking around the cars. She notices him getting a parking ticket shortly before the shooting. She reports it. The police trace the ticket to David Berkowitz's car. And when detectives finally roll up to his Yonkers apartment, what do they find in the backseat of his car? The .44 caliber revolver. When they arrest him, he smiles and says, "Well, you got me." Like he's relieved. Like it was all a game and he knew it would end eventually. But the fear he created, the chaos, the way the city of New York was paralyzed for over a year, that was very, very real. And the thing about Berkowitz is he wasn't a genius criminal. He wasn't meticulous. He didn't cover his tracks brilliantly. He was actually kind of sloppy. But the randomness of his violence, the fact that anyone could be next, that's what made him so terrifying. New York City in the late 70s was already on edge. Crime, poverty, the blackout riots, everything was unstable. And Son of Sam became the symbol of the city's fear. He fed on that. He loved it. He clipped the headlines. He watched the hysteria, and it made him feel powerful. And then, with one parking ticket, it was over. So, Son of Sam is finally on the radar. After over a year of chaos, fear, and way too many innocent lives stolen, police have their first real lead, a parking ticket. Yeah, something that small. That one tiny detail ends up cracking the whole case. Here's how it goes down. After the last attack in Brooklyn, the one where poor Stacy Moskowitz is killed and Robert Violani is left blinded, a woman named Cecilia Davis is out walking her dog. She notices something weird. This guy is skulking around near the parked cars, almost like he's casing them. And then she sees a cop writing a parking ticket for a yellow Ford Galaxy. That image sticks in her head. After she hears about the shooting later that night, she connects the dots. She tells police what she saw. Now, police go back and start combing through all the parking tickets issued near the scene that night. And sure enough, one of them belongs to a David Berkowitz of Yonkers. They run his name and find out he owns a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver, the exact kind of weapon that ballistic tests have tied to all the shootings. At this point, NYPD is like, okay, we might actually have him. But they don't want to spook him. They set up surveillance outside his apartment building. They watch him come and go. And eventually they decide to move in. August 10th, 1977, detectives surround his building in Yonkers. Two of them walk up to his car, a beat-up Ford Galaxy, and what do they see sitting in the back seat? The .44 revolver. Just casually lying there like it's no big deal. They pop the trunk, and there's a duffel bag with ammunition, maps of crime scenes, and a letter he was planning to send. I mean, talk about sloppy. When they knock on his apartment door, he doesn't even put up a fight. He opens the door, looks at them, and supposedly says, "Well, you got me," like he was expecting it. Like the whole thing was just waiting for this moment. So they haul him in for questioning. And here's where it gets really creepy. He's calm. He's almost polite. Not the frothing at the mouth madman you might expect. He admits to the shootings. He says he's the son of Sam. And then he launches into a whole story about how a demon possessed his neighbor's dog and ordered him to kill. This is the part that gets burned into the public imagination. He claims Sam Carr, his neighbor, is actually a high-ranking demon, and that Carr's dog, a black Labrador, was channeling satanic commands. According to Berkowitz, he was just a soldier. He was following orders. And here's the thing. The police aren't sure what to make of it. On one hand, he's confessing. On the other hand, the story sounds absolutely bonkers. So they press him. They ask him why he targeted couples. He says the voices told him. They ask why he used a .44 revolver. He says that's what the demon demanded. The answers are bizarre, inconsistent, almost like he's weaving a mythology around himself. Now, psychologists later debate this a lot. Some say he was schizophrenic and genuinely believe the dog was talking to him. Others say he made it up as a way to dodge the death penalty or make himself seem larger than life. What's undeniable is that he loved the attention. He loved spinning the story, watching people squirm, making headlines even from behind bars. During interrogation, he also admits to something else that gets overlooked sometimes. He set over 1,000 fires around New York before the shootings ever started. 1,000. He kept records of them, little notes about each blaze. And no one had a clue until he told them. That's how deep his obsession with destruction went. The detectives are sitting there listening to this guy talk about demons, fires, and killings, and they realize something chilling. He doesn't feel remorse. Not even a flicker. He isn't crying. He isn't apologizing. He's matter of fact, almost smug, like he's finally getting the recognition he always wanted. Meanwhile, the news of his arrest spreads like wildfire. New Yorkers are relieved, ecstatic, finally able to breathe after more than a year of terror. The son of Sam is caught. People pour into the streets, celebrating. But along with the relief comes fascination. Everyone wants to know who this man is, why he did it, and whether he's insane or evil. When his mugshot hits the papers, people are shocked. He doesn't look like a monster. He looks like a regular guy. Stocky build, curly hair, a face you'd pass on the street without a second thought. That, honestly, makes it scarier. The son of Sam wasn't some shadowy figure lurking in the alleys. He was a guy next door. Over the next few days, the police questioned him repeatedly, trying to untangle what's real and what's fantasy. He tells them he picked couples because their happiness mocked his loneliness. He tells them he heard the voices stronger when the dog barked. He tells them killing was the only way to quiet the noise in his head. It's a jumble of rage, delusion, and self-pity. But despite the wild stories, the evidence is solid. Ballistics tie his gun to the shootings. Witnesses place him near the scenes. His own writings, his own words, seal the deal. This isn't just a guy talking crazy. This is the son of Sam, caught red-handed. What's eerie is how quickly he adapts to his new role. In custody, he seems almost comfortable. Reporters scream his name outside the precinct, and he soaks it up. He knows he's a household name now. He went from lonely David Berkowitz to infamous son of Sam overnight. And that transformation? That's exactly what he always wanted. But the public isn't buying the demon story entirely. People are horrified, sure, but they're also skeptical. Was this man truly possessed, or was he just a sad, angry loner who liked the idea of being a servant of evil because it made him feel special? That's the question that lingers as his case moves toward trial. So, David Berkowitz has been arrested, and New York is breathing again. But now comes the part where the criminal justice system has to figure out what to do with him. And with a guy like Berkowitz, it wasn't just about putting him on trial for murder. It became a spectacle. It became theater. It became this giant cultural event. Because the public wasn't just hungry for justice. They were obsessed with the son of Sam. When the news broke that the son of Sam was just this 24-year-old postal worker from Yonkers, people couldn't believe it. He didn't look like a monster. He didn't sound like a genius criminal mastermind. He was just average. And that disconnect made people even more fascinated. How could someone so ordinary have terrorized the biggest city in America for over a year? The trial was set, and right away, Berkowitz's defense team leaned into the insanity angle. They wanted him declared mentally unfit, hoping to avoid prison time and get him committed to a psychiatric institution instead. And honestly, it wasn't a stretch. He was claiming demons told him to kill, that his neighbor's dog was channeling Satan's orders. On paper, it looked like textbook schizophrenia, but prosecutors weren't having it. They knew he wanted to hide behind the insanity defense. They knew he loved the story of being the supernatural soldier, but the reality was he planned the murders. He bought the gun illegally. He stalked his victims. He left letters for police. He bragged about the killings. Those aren't the actions of someone who doesn't understand what they're doing. Those are the actions of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and who likes the spotlight. So they pushed hard to prove he was sane enough to stand trial. And after psychiatric evaluations, the court agreed. David Berkowitz was found competent. He would face trial for 6 counts of murder and multiple attempted murders. Now here's where it gets messy. The press coverage was nonstop. Every day, newspapers splashed his face across the front page. Reporters dug into his childhood, his army record, his creepy writings. They published every bizarre detail, from the demon dog story to his fire-setting diaries. And the more they published, the more the public couldn't get enough. People lined up outside the courthouse just to catch a glimpse of him being led in and out in handcuffs. Journalists swarmed the courtroom. Every word, every twitch, every smirk was recorded. Berkowitz, who had craved attention his whole life, was now the center of a circus. And he knew it. He played it up. He smiled at cameras. He whispered strange things under his breath. He acted erratic one day and calm the next. It was like he was directing his own horror show, making sure his name never left the headlines. Then, in May of 1978, something wild happened. In the middle of a hearing, Berkowitz suddenly lunged at one of the prosecutors. He screamed, "Stacy was a whore," referring to Stacy Moskowitz, his last victim. He had to be restrained by officers as the courtroom erupted in chaos. That moment shocked everyone. It was cruel, it was chilling, and it showed the world that this wasn't just an act. He wasn't just eccentric. He was vicious, unrepentant, and reveling in the cruelty of it all. After that outburst, the insanity defense didn't stand much of a chance. The jury wasn't going to buy the demon dog made me do it excuse after seeing him lash out with such calculated venom. But before it could even get to a dramatic trial, Berkowitz suddenly pled guilty. Just like that. No jury trial, no long deliberations. He stood before the judge and admitted to 6 murders and the wounding of 7 others. People were stunned. Why confess? Why give up the spotlight of the trial? Some think he was trying to control the narrative again. If he pled guilty, he could avoid more psychiatric evaluations that might have exposed him as a fraud. Others think he was tired of the game. That part of him wanted to be punished. But knowing Berkowitz, it was probably about power. He wanted to end things on his terms, not let a jury decide. At his sentencing in June 1978, the courtroom was packed. Families of victims sat there waiting for justice. Reporters jostled for position. Berkowitz walked in, calm as ever. The judge sentenced him to 25 years to life for each murder, 6 consecutive sentences, basically ensuring he would never walk free again. But in true Berkowitz fashion, even sentencing couldn't happen without drama. When the judge was about to hand down the punishment, Berkowitz suddenly tried to throw himself out of a 7-story window. Officers tackled him before he could do it. As they dragged him away, he screamed, "I'd kill them all again." The families gasped. Reporters scribbled furiously, and the son of Sam stamped one last horrifying impression into the minds of everyone watching. So, just like that, the trial was over. Berkowitz was locked away, and New York was safe. But the story didn't end there, because the media wouldn't let it. The son of Sam became a cultural phenomenon. He was on the front page of every paper, the subject of books, documentaries, endless speculation. People dissected his letters, his interviews, his strange ramblings. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a character, a symbol of evil, a boogeyman for the modern age. And here's where it gets really twisted. While he sat in prison, people started writing to him. Women sent love letters. Fans sent gifts. He got attention from the outside world, like he was some kind of dark celebrity. And Berkowitz loved it. He answered letters. He played up the mystique. He kept himself relevant. The fascination even went so far that New York State had to pass a law in 1977, literally because of him. It was called the Son of Sam Law. Basically, it said criminals couldn't profit off the publicity of their crimes. Before that, there was a real concern Berkowitz might sell his story, make money off book deals, or otherwise cash in on fame. The law made sure any profits went to the victims' families instead. That's how big his trial and media frenzy were. He literally changed the legal system. But at the heart of all the spectacle, the tragedy often got overshadowed. Real people died. Real families were shattered. Young women and men had their lives cut short for no reason other than David Berkowitz wanted to feel powerful. And while the camera zoomed in on his smirk, those families sat there in grief. Try to understand how a stranger with a gun could destroy everything in an instant. The trial ended. The cameras moved on, but the damage remained. And Berkowitz? He went to prison with exactly what he wanted. A name that would live on forever. Son of Sam wasn't just a headline anymore. It was history. So, David Berkowitz is locked away. Older now. Reinvented as a so-called son of hope. But the thing about stories like his is that they don't just end with prison. They ripple outward. They leave fingerprints on culture, on law, on how people see the world. And the Son of Sam case left behind one hell of a legacy. First, let's talk about New York in the late 70s. The city was already in crisis, financially, socially. Crime was skyrocketing. Neighborhoods were falling apart. The Son of Sam murders poured gasoline on that fire. People were already afraid of the dark, already wary of crime. Then suddenly, there's this unknown figure roaming the streets, killing randomly, targeting young couples. It made a city already on edge feel like a war zone. People talk about 1977 like it was this fever dream. Blackouts, riots, the Yankees win the World Series, Studio 54 opening, disco everywhere. And woven through all of it was Son of Sam. It became part of New York's identity. Ask anyone who lived there at the time, and they'll tell you. You couldn't escape it. The fear was in the air. The newspapers were filled with it. The radio talked about it every morning. Parents warned their kids not to go out at night. People actually dyed their hair or cut it short, so they wouldn't fit the killer's preferred victim look. That's how real the terror was. And even after his arrest, that fear didn't vanish. It lingered. The city had been marked. New Yorkers would forever remember the summer of '77 as the Summer of Sam, a time when the city itself felt haunted. But Berkowitz didn't just change the mood of the city. He literally changed the law. Remember the Son of Sam law? Passed in 1977. It made sure criminals couldn't make money by selling their story rights to publishers or filmmakers. Before that, nothing stopped a killer from profiting off the fame of their crimes. Imagine Berkowitz selling a tell-all book deal and pocketing the money while victims' families grieved. The outrage over that possibility was so intense that lawmakers acted fast. Of course, the law itself got messy later. Courts argued about free speech. Some cases struck parts of it down, but the core idea stuck. To this day, there are laws across the U.S. that stop criminals from cashing in on their crimes. That's Berkowitz's fingerprint. Then there's the cultural impact. The Son of Sam story has been told and retold endlessly. Movies, documentaries, books, even songs. Spike Lee made a whole film called Summer of Sam in 1999, capturing that paranoid, chaotic New York summer. Countless true crime shows have covered it. His letters are studied like twisted pieces of literature. And his name? It became shorthand for evil. Son of Sam isn't just a person anymore. It's an archetype, a brand of terror. It even influenced how police handle serial killers. Before Son of Sam, communication between different police precincts wasn't always smooth. His attacks crossed multiple boroughs, and sometimes departments weren't sharing information fast enough. That slowed the investigation. Afterward, law enforcement realized they had to improve coordination, create task forces, build systems to track patterns across jurisdictions. In a way, Berkowitz exposed the cracks in policing that needed fixing. And then there's the psychology side. Berkowitz became a case study in criminal profiling. He fit the mold of the disorganized killer, socially awkward loner, sudden violent outbursts, but also displayed traits of the organized killer, stalking victims, writing taunting letters, playing with the media. Psychologists and FBI profilers dissected him, trying to understand what made him tick. And he ended up shaping the field of criminal psychology in the process. But perhaps the most unsettling part of his legacy is how he represents something bigger than himself. Berkowitz wasn't the first serial killer, and he wasn't the last. But he arrived at this moment when media was exploding. 24/7 coverage, tabloid headlines, TV news booming. He was one of the first modern serial killers in that sense. His crimes weren't just murders. They were content. The letters he wrote, they were designed for headlines. His courtroom outbursts, perfect for TV clips. He instinctively understood how to keep himself relevant in the age of mass media. That's why people still talk about him. Because it wasn't just the violence. It was the performance. And in that way, Berkowitz set the template for the kind of killers who came after him. The ones who want their names remembered, who crave the spotlight as much as the blood. And here's the really dark twist. Even today, decades later, he still has fans. People still write to him. Some see him as a redeemed Christian figure. Others see him as a twisted celebrity. He remains this magnet for fascination, proof that in some corner of society, evil can be alluring. But for the victims' families, the legacy is far simpler. They remember their loved ones as young, full of life, with futures ahead of them, futures stolen for no reason. They've spent decades living with the pain, watching as Berkowitz gets interviewed, as movies are made, as documentaries rehash the story again and again. For them, the Son of Sam legacy is personal and permanent, and that's what makes this story so haunting. On one hand, you have the city, the culture, the laws, all forever shaped by his crimes. On the other, you have the lives shattered, the people who never came home, the families who never stopped grieving. Berkowitz may have reinvented himself, may call himself Son of Hope now, but to those families, he will always be the man who pointed a gun and took everything away. So when we talk about legacy, it's not just about him. It's about what he left behind. A scar on New York City, a change in the justice system, a lesson for law enforcement, a cautionary tale about media and fame, and above all, a reminder that behind every headline, there are real human beings whose stories were cut short. That's the legacy of David Berkowitz. Not just Son of Sam, not just Son of Hope, but man who turned murder into theater and left a city forever changed. All right, my friends, that's today's story. If you enjoyed hanging out with me and diving into this wild case, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. And hey, give this video a like if you're into true crime deep dives, because it really helps the channel out. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.